your medical education and mine would have been not dissimilar when it comes to nutrition, which was, excuse the language, but bugger all. And what information we were given was from the food pyramid, the processed food industry, over time. So it's been a learning experience for me to actually go back to understand that biochemistry and how much of our medical textbooks have been totally flawed. Once you realise, I say to use the term, once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The biochemistry is what's actually happening at a cellular level. That's science. What happens outside of the body is politics and money and religion and all these other things which are God. But what happens inside the cell is science. So if you're a doctor and you don't understand this, you're negligent. I've been on this battlefront for so many years now. I'm happy to say you are negligent as a doctor if you don't understand this topic.
Hello and great day, low carbers. I am Dr. Don AHPRA, and this is the Low Carb Health Doctor podcast. In this episode, I am very, very highly honored to have as our guest one of the biggest pillars of the Low Carb Healthy Fats movement, which is a grassroots movement worldwide. And I'm quite sure that if you have gone through a lot of your own research about the ins and outs of the low carbohydrate diet, you would have encountered his name perhaps one way or another. He is a physician, a practicing orthopedic surgeon from Tasmania, Australia, and he's no other than Dr. Gary Fettke himself. Welcome to the Low Carb Health Doctor platforms, Gary.
I'm looking forward to our chat, Don. Should be fun.
Your story, Gary, reminds me of Professor Tim Noakes of South Africa, especially the events surrounding his professional life that are of similar nature to what you had to go through in defense of your stance against sugar and high carbohydrates.
Tim and I have become good friends over the years, and his case was an open court hearing, and mine was behind closed doors. We call it a kangaroo court here in Australia because you don't get to say anything. They just keep making judgments about you from this blank wall, and you can never actually find out who your accusers are. And so you're throwing information in and justifying what you're doing. But as a result of that, I learned a lot more. I started off and I've effectively done a PhD in nutritional science, in actual nutritional science and biochemistry, rather than, so your medical education and mine would have been not dissimilar when it comes to nutrition, which was, excuse the language, but bugger all. And what information we were given was from the food pyramid, the processed food industry, over time. So it's been a learning experience for me to actually go back to understand that biochemistry and to realise how much of it and how much of our medical textbooks have been totally flawed. Once you realise, I say to use the term, once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And so therefore, when you actually go back and realise, actually all my medical textbooks have been written by those with conflicts of interest, and all of our medical experiments have been written by pharmaceutical interests. And, most of the drugs that we use have been done on 70-kilo males. They were never tested on women. And I know it's slightly different. There's a slighter build in the Philippines, but it's pretty hard to find a 70-kilo male in Australia. It's 150-odd pounds. All the pharmaceutical drugs tested are never done on people taking 2 or 3 medications, they're only done on 1. So once you start realising how much our medical education is flawed, it's okay to go back to the basics, which is all I did. Just go back to biochemistry, go back to the Krebs cycle, go back to that and find out, well, actually what we've been telling our patients has actually been making them sicker, not better.
Yeah, just to clarify on that, perhaps it's probably those the medical education that we got during those clinical years that were somehow very much affected by those propaganda. It was because, in fairness, if we go back to biochemistry, we go back to the textbooks in biochemistry and physiology, it's all there, right? So I suppose if we go back to basic medical school, yeah, it's just like, yeah.
Well, not fructose. In fact, we're still learning about glucose and fructose, but I mean, the metabolism of fructose. So fructose is half of the sugar molecule. You've got glucose and fructose, and that's half of it. So my biochemistry books I've gone back to them, ones I studied, and it went fructose 6-phosphate, and then that was it. Nobody ever knew anything else about it. Well, I presume they just didn't put it now. General Regan wrote books about it, but never made it into our textbooks. We knew a bit more about glucose metabolism, but the metabolism of fructose was really only worked out about 10 years ago. So for even the students today, it's actually not in their textbooks.
Oh, yeah.
But it is just biochemistry. When you go looking at it, it's biochemistry. And when you look at the science, which is what is non-arguable about, well, you're supposed to challenge science, but the biochemistry is what's actually happening at a cellular level. That's science. What happens outside of the body is politics and money and religion and all these other things which are God. But what happens inside the cell is science. So that's what I've based my arguments about what's happening inside the body. And Belinda's work has been about actually, she said, look, I believe you. I believe Tim Noakes. So, you guys seem to know your biochemistry. Why are you getting hammered? Well, that's as important to find out why you're getting into trouble for talking about the basics as it is to know the basics. So we've been very proudly, supporting each other for a long period of time, and hopefully the low carb community, because when you talk, we talked a little bit before about the Atkins, and everyone frowned upon the Atkins. Well, he had it. He was completely on board with it, but it's going against the establishment. So you and I have had to admit that we got it wrong. We had to admit that our education was wrong. We had to admit that our teachers were wrong. It's very hard. I call that generational education. Our teachers believe their teachers, and their teachers believe their teachers. But you and I, are not believing our teachers. And that's hard to go up against generational education. It's hard to go up against your textbooks to say, actually, your textbooks are wrong. But then once you start dragging it back to biochemistry, our textbooks are wrong. Except for the latest one out, which is called Ketogenics, which is actually a textbook put together by a whole lot of people around the world, which is really intensely accurate. I mean, I've written a chapter there in the orthopedic bit, and the amount of cross-checking that was done by several others, I had to justify every single sentence, every single word that I put in there, and they were critical as. So everything's completely up to date based on science and biochemistry and not on opinion.
You're part of that project, right?
I was part of it, yeah, proudly part of it. And but again, it's the Noakes Foundation have put that on. But that is a book, and that's I've got a copy somewhere here behind me. But that is definitely that'll be the go-to book for the next several years, completely referenced, and then it will be updated over time because there's more and more science coming out supporting this issue and clarifying things around the edges of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, going back to that, you were saying about medical education earlier. I recently had a chat with one of our residents in internal medicine, and I'm sharing all of this, let's say, real things, truths about metabolism and all that. And one of our residents opened up to me his dilemma. He said he understands all of this now, and he's opened his eyes to this, except that when he takes his written exams and when he officially answers the questions being asked, because he is in training, then he has to submit himself to what's out there in the textbooks, because if he would be answering the things that he now knows, then he's probably not gonna go through training and finish his training because he's got all the answers wrong.
I understand that, and it's a dilemma faced by a lot of. It's not just doctors and physicians. It's it's dietitians, nurses, dentists, pharmacists who are now. I make them promise me something though. I say, you now understand it. What you need to do is you need to pass your exam. The moment you pass your exam, you've then got to stand up
for what's right,
for what is correct, true, and take that forward. And we are slow. I mean, we are slowly turning this huge juggernaut around. It is not. It's. I can tell you when I started talking about this 13 years ago, everyone thought I was from a different planet. You know, my medical colleagues thought that I'm stark raving mad. I might still be stark raving mad, but the problem is we now have a great, doctors have a greater understanding of insulin. They have a greater understanding of glucose and metabolism. Here in Australia, we have cookbooks talking about low carb. We've got cookbooks talking about keto. We've even got beer. We've got 5 different, at last count, 5 different low carb beers for sale in Australia. I mean, the Philippines is a great big beer drinking country. Have you got low carb beer there yet?
Yeah, there is. They call it light beer. So and then I checked. Yeah, there seems to be less carbohydrates there.
So the market is responding to what we're talking about. So therefore, the people are listening to that. Ultimately, if you're a doctor and you don't adopt this into your practice as a tool, a therapeutic carbohydrate restriction for those people that are metabolically unwell, if you don't put that into your armamentarium and offer it, then I think you're negligent. And if you've got a patient with type 2 diabetes and you don't offer them that as an option, rather than more and more drugs, then you're negligent. And they're big words and they're harsh words, but you cannot be a doctor now in 2023 and not have heard about this.
Unless you're still hooked onto, propaganda that is...
Oh, no, what I'm saying is you can still be hooked on the propaganda, but there cannot be a doctor in the Western world now, who's exposed to the English-speaking languages and goes to the shops and sees a book on low carb or drinks a beer and it's low carb beer, who is not exposed and should to the concept of lowering carbohydrate intake. So if you're a doctor and there's something happening in society, it's your job to actually become informed about that. Something as powerful as this and as topical as this. So if you're a doctor and you don't understand this, you're negligent. I've been on this battlefront for so many years now. I'm happy to say you are negligent as a doctor if you don't understand this topic, because it's huge. Lots of patients are asking, and I actually think, in a non-confrontational way, every patient who's had a benefit of this should go to the doctor and say, "This has happened to me. What do you think about it?" That's not confrontational. And the doctors say, well, it's incredibly dangerous, but gee, you look good and you look healthier and your blood tests have improved. You've lost weight, your blood pressure's come down and your visceral fat's come down and your kidney function's improved and your brain's working better. But don't do low carb or keto because it's dangerous. At least that person's now making, I'm just saying, doctors have to become informed about topics which are hot in the public press, in the media, in social media. You need to be informed about it. And the journals all around the world are talking about it. They may not all be coming on board with it as strongly as we feel, but they are talking about it. So if you're not informed about this as a doctor, sorry, you're negligent.
Yeah, talking about that, there's this, the dilemma, or not really dilemma, but the debate between two factions, the carbohydrate insulin model and the calories in, calories out model. Because I was recently talking to a friend of mine who's also a doctor, and he said it's okay, it's better to be drinking the low carb beer, because for him it has less calories.
Well, apart from it's two things about that. We can talk about alcohol and how if you drink alcohol, you won't lose weight. That's one thing. The other thing is, if you're a doctor, you have to admit that you got it wrong. And most doctors, most healthcare professionals hate to admit that they got it wrong. Theoretically, you're supposed to be intelligent, you've achieved high marks at school and you've gone through university. And doctors are painted in this light that they're smart and intelligent people. I actually think they might be smart and intelligent, but they find it very, very difficult to say, I got it wrong. But the moment you say, I got it wrong, which is what you teach your children, you've got, children, and you tell, when they make a mistake, you say, admit that you got it wrong, and let's all learn from that, and we'll move on. That's called parenting. Why can't the medical profession say, oops, sorry, we got it wrong. We've learned from all that. Let's move on. So doctors might be intelligent, but they're not very smart. So the other thing is that if you drink alcohol, you will not be able to. You'll struggle to lose weight. It's what we call an old wives' tale. Stop drinking alcohol. But the mechanism of action is through glucagon. I find this very interesting. So the pancreas, as you know, secretes two hormones largely, glucagon and insulin. Insulin we know a lot about. So if you eat carbohydrate, the pancreas secretes insulin. The insulin affects the body then to store that as fat. So insulin is also a growth hormone for cancers, and it's also an inflammation hormone for osteoarthritis in particular. But the other side of the thing, so insulin lowers blood glucose. Glucagon is one that raises blood glucose. So when you're not eating or you sleep at night, the glucagon keeps the blood glucose level. When you drink alcohol, the alcohol goes straight to the liver, and the liver sees that as toxic, and it turns off all of its other, it slows down or it stops most of its other pathways to get rid of the alcohol. One pathway it stops is the glucagon pathway. So when glucagon keeps your blood glucose up by burning the triglycerides, the glycerol chain of the fat, and to push that into the bloodstream as glucose. So when you drink alcohol, you stop your ability to burn, you slow up that ability to burn fat. I've done the experiment myself, and effectively what's happened is when you actually just drink alcohol on an empty stomach, your blood glucose falls and it stays down. And it stayed down for me for it's near on 14 hours, sorry. And effectively you're turning off your burning of fat, you're slowing up your gluconeogenesis to keep you, and as a result of that, you're relatively lower in your glucose, so you're hungry. So there are lots of people who've actually, they go out for a night on the grog, they have some glasses of wine or beer or whatever spirits, and on the way home they're incredibly hungry. So they stop for a kebab, they get home, they eat ice cream or something at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So everyone's been aware of this. If you drink alcohol, you're often hungry. Restaurants do it deliberately, because if they give you alcohol, then you're going to eat more food and you're going to buy more food, so there's more profitability. But there's an awareness that alcohol will make you hungry. Sugar will make you hungry. Oh, that's another pathway. But essentially, with the alcohol, those people, if you drink alcohol, you'll find that your ability to lose weight drops significantly. And those people then cut alcohol out of the equation when they're trying to lose weight. Actually, they lose weight quicker. And I've got lots of stories about that, but effectively, most people say they don't want to hear, they don't want to know I presented that information at Low Carb USA a couple of years ago, and I think there were about 300 or 400 people in the audience said, "Shut up, Dr. Fettke, we don't want to know." I'd much rather drink their alcohol.
All for alcohol. So we're both doctors, so I'm sure many of our medical colleagues the world over, should they be listening to this right now, would be interested also to know more about these things that we're talking about. And I hope all those lay people listening in also will be able to follow, whether they be already aware of the low carbohydrate diet benefits or not, and are still in the process of discovering what it really is all about. Before we go any further, Gary, I have to admit that you and also Professor Tim Noakes, have indeed paved the way for doctors like me to be more openly able to advocate the low carbohydrate, healthy fats nutrition now, with much less flack, I suppose, as compared to your times before.
Well, neither of us meant to get into trouble. We just were doing the right thing by our patients, and I know that's what we're supposed to all do as medical. So therefore, when you know you're doing the right thing, it very clearly came down to, well, who doesn't want to get this message out? So ultimately, it's the ultra-processed food industry with its many hats, food, pharmaceutical, religious ideology, that actually has a lot to lose from what we're talking about. And so my talks, which are largely on YouTube and other platforms, but are about the biochemistry, the science, and putting it into terms that the layperson can understand, and then we can move forward from that. Some of them go into more detail than others, but so if people are interested in that, I've done it as simply as possibly can, with lots of pictures and stuff, to actually make it simple for people to understand, because it is actually simple. I actually got one of the criticism from the medical board at one time is I said I was accused of making things too simple for people to understand. I'm not making this up. They said, you can't make it too simple. I said, yes, I can. It is simple. It's the Krebs cycle. It's our simple biochemistry. We can't, if we can't get this message across, then how do we get more complex ones? So the medical system doesn't like patients being informed. It's terrifying, but that it doesn't like it. So when we go down those pathways, my talks are about science, Belinda's talks are about why the message is being blocked. But it was critical that we won those court cases, those legal scenarios, so that literally the moment those cases were settled in our favour, no one's been charged. There's been other doctors around the world, and I've supported a few here in Australia, New Zealand, Canada in particular, who have been caught up in the same thing. But all of their cases have been thrown out very quickly. And we don't have to go through all of this again. So it did literally open up the door for people like yourself and others who have, taken on the baton and require ongoing support to go forward with safety, because you're basing your thoughts and your practices on biochemistry with good patient outcomes. And so, but if people are just trying to do it without the support of their doctor, it's tricky. And if their doctors are telling them it's dangerous when it's not, then I'll come back to that word negligent. It's very hard for most people to actually go against their doctor's advice.
Yeah,
but it's now up to the patients to sort of educate the doctors. And if the doctors don't want to listen, then, I actually think the medical profession is getting ready to be sued big time. Because if you're withholding this information, then, bad luck. So, your resident there, he's quite right. He wants to get his job, but once he's got his job, gosh, he's got to do the right thing by his patients, because ultimately that's what our careers are about. It's not about making money and having. It's about doing it's literally just about caring for your patients. Now, and I know I say it, but gosh, so many people want to protect their livelihood that they worry about it.
Yeah, part of human nature, I suppose.
So you realise I'm fairly harsh now about human nature as well.
So about 2 days ago, we had here in the Philippines the first ever, the second run of the what we call the National Low Carb Day. They're in the capital, Manila. So there's a few low carb educated doctors who were there with me, and one of which is like Dr. Grace Rohotan, was been publicly advocating for low carbohydrate here in the Philippines for quite some time already. I think running for probably 5 or so years. She's an otorhinolaryngologist, by the way, an ENT doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine an ENT doctor advocating for low carbohydrate diet for patients. And of course, I would understand that it would be much easier for her to get flack from other doctors, especially those supposedly specializing on diabetes and metabolism, So it went well, and it's good that more and more people are becoming aware of what really is the truth behind nutrition. Even the lay people, because of internet, they get to hear a lot about these discussions, like what we are doing right now. I hope this is helping our audience well. And I was asked this question as what's supposed to be my takeaway message, and I told them the same way that I'm telling my patients. I need to tell them, the audience being patients, that they should understand that their health is their own personal responsibility, and not really totally their doctors, because it's their duty to learn what really is the truth out there. Because if in the end their doctors, the doctors they're seeing, are indeed giving them the wrong advice, then who's going to suffer in the end? It's them, right?
I think I've written the dietary guidelines for the world in one sentence. So if you let me indulge, then it's just as applicable in Manila as it is in Tasmania. And it's that you should be eating fresh, local, seasonal, whole food based on your environment and culture, avoiding added sugar and processed carbohydrates. It's very safe. That is, in fact, low carb. And here in Australia, particularly in Tasmania, we are privileged enough to be able to get access to fresh, local, seasonal, whole food. There are many places in the world where you don't have access to fresh, local, and Manila is one of those. I've never been to Manila, but I do have family who have spent a long time there, and it's hard, like rice is a major staple, and it's actually, a lot of it's imported. I don't presume there are a lot of paddy fields in Manila.
Yeah, outside in the provinces there are, but of course, as many Filipinos would say, rice is life. Would you believe that?
Yeah, I'm well aware of that. But traditionally, my understanding of most Eastern diets in the Philippines before, had its major issues related to the war and the Second World War and infiltration of Western influence, those traditional diets, rice was the side dish where surrounded by meat and vegetables. So it wasn't the big, here in Australia, people have this big roll of rice, whereas it used to be a small dish of rice. And Japan, that still is. Rice is a small dish as a side dish rather than as the main dish. And I think we have to go back to that, whether or not it's called, Ken Berry calls it the proper human diet or the evolutionary diet, or that, and we live in such food deserts now, large numbers of people, billions of people around the world live in scenarios now in the big cities where it's very difficult to get access to that whole low-carb food. Karen Zinn from New Zealand describes it very well by calling it empty pantry, full fridge. So that you want to have very little on your shelf. But the trouble is, packets of food, packets of carbohydrate, ultra-processed food, have long shelf life, they have easy transportability, and they're highly profitable for the food industry. And they're cheap. But if you keep eating cheap and nasty food over time, and if you keep putting the wrong fuel in the car, over time the engine will get into trouble. And that's what we're just seeing catching up. And yes, it is a bit more expensive, and yes, it's harder to eat a more animal-based product diet, but it's healthier for the car in the long term.
What advice can you give physicians like me who are just much recently awakened to this, false propaganda from mainstream medicine that has been painted towards the anti-low carbohydrate, high healthy fats diet?
I think it's as a medico, you're obligated to keep up to date with information. And the most important thing I found in my practice is to admit that I got things wrong. Oops, sorry, no, that was well intentioned, but we need to move forward. There are so many talks now on YouTube. There are books available on this. There are textbooks on it. I sort of say, look, go and look at a couple of my talks on the nutritional model of inflammation. There's 25 minutes. It's not going to take an enormous amount of time. And you start educating yourself. And once you start realizing this is just biochemistry in action, and you have the ability to turn around your patients' lives literally overnight by finding out more about it without having to pick up a pen, without having to write another prescription. There are so many doctors out there who are actually lost what we call the joy of medicine, because you're just going along and you're band-aiding sick care. And this LCHF is the one thing which seems to be restoring the joy of medicine to doctors' lives. Not just improving their patients, but actually giving them quality work life. And that's a common theme. For me, I went, wow, I don't have to operate as much. The results are so much better. The patient's getting better. That's theoretically why we did medicine, is to make people better. And if you're sick and tired of a lifetime of band-aiding sick care, then this is the opportunity for doctors to actually not just improve their patients' health, but their own health as well. That's it. Learn more.
Thanks very much for that. And before we end this, may I ask how may people follow you? What are your current online and social media presence that they can follow you?
As I said, Belinda's having a bit of time off at the moment. We've got grandchildren and other things going on. Our talks are on YouTube. I'm on Twitter under Gary Fettke or Fructose No. We're on Facebook and Instagram as well. But I think the easiest points of contact to find out more is YouTube. We've both got websites. I've got a website called nofructose.com. Belinda has one called isupportgary.com. She's got a new one coming called belindafetke.com. But that's the information we're there is for everyone to do what they want. They can criticize it, they can learn more, they can use it as a stepping stone on. But we actually think it's important, and I think it's making a difference.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Gary.
Right.
Again, I would say that it's indeed a big honor to have you here in the Low Carb Health Doctor platform, and I sincerely hope that many of our audience are getting much of the conversation that we are having here. And I hope we can have the opportunity again to talk to you in my platform.
Thank you, Don. It's
So,
my first conversation in the Philippines.
really?
Yes, well, I get on low carb, so we've had a
Yeah. Well,
chat to a
more
few
than
other.
this, hopefully.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. I have indirectly, I have family there, so it's good.
Oh, really? Okay, thank you very much, Gary.
All right, no worries. All the best. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.